Hey, it's Pastor Mike Conklin here in icy, beautiful downtown Sandusky. It's been a very icy morning. Of course, it has been over the Northeast today, and I hope everyone's staying safe and off the ice. Had several reports from people in Michigan who were slipping and sliding and injuring themselves, and we've already had two broken bones this year at Zion. So be careful out there, folks. Wear your grippers, or salt the walks, or just stay inside. It is February 6th, Thursday, and we're going to be looking at the Psalm 138 for this Sunday and the Gospel from Luke, chapter 5, verse 1 through 11. If you remember, Tuesday we looked at Isaiah 6, the call of Isaiah, and that was verses 1 through 13. And in the Gospel we have the call of Peter and Andrew. We don't find out it's Andrew until the end, I don't think, though. But it's Peter's brother. And the sons of Zebedee, the sons of thunder. So we'll get to that in a minute. Let's look at the Psalm 138. Psalm 138 is another psalm attributed to David. Whether David wrote all these psalms or not, we don't know. But David was a musician, and so a lot of the psalms are attributed to him. The psalms in themselves, the book of Psalms is the hymnal for much of the Jewish religion. It has their songs in it. And not that there are not other songs throughout the Old Testament that they use in worship, but the Psalms themselves are basically songs that are the hymns of the temple and the synagogue. This one, again, attributed to David. Whether they are all attributed to David or not, a lot of them are. But then there are other times when it's attributed to other people or for somebody else, the choir or another musician. This Psalm 138 is about deliverance from trouble. A lot of Psalms are about deliverance from something. Trouble, sin, enemies, sickness, health issues. A lot of Psalms are written and sung to relieve us from the burdens of what happens in this life, some of the negative things. So this is a psalm of deliverance from troubles, not very specific about what the trouble is, but it could be any number of things. And so you can sing this psalm or pray this psalm for various situations. It starts out with thanksgiving in the first two verses where they are giving thanks. Then in the third verse it talks about the experience of the psalmist. When I called you, you answered me, you increased my strength. That is sort of then the experience of the psalmist. And then it finally ends with two verses based about having faith. And again, that fits in well with the Isaiah text from Isaiah 6, where the call of Isaiah is in the temple, and Isaiah needs to have this faith, and God cleanses him so that he can speak, and he can speak for God and be in the presence of God. So God is the one who forgives sins. And it also talks about the same sort of thing with Peter. Peter falls before the Lord and says, I'm a sinful man. And that does not disqualify us. Being a sinner does not disqualify us from being God's emissaries or called by God. I am witness to this fact that God does call sinners. And God puts the words in our mouth most of the time. Sometimes we think we can speak for God, but we learn very quickly that that is not the case. So there is this last two verses really deal with having faith. Though I walk through the midst of trouble, you keep me safe. You stretch forth your hand against the fury of my enemies. Your right hand shall save me. You will make good your purpose for me, O Lord. Your steadfast love endures forever, and do not abandon the works of your hands. So, in other words, I am your creation. Deliver me from my enemies, as you have done in the past, and has been my experience with you. So let's go ahead and just read all of Psalm 138. It's not it's a relatively short psalm. I will give thanks to you, O Lord, with my whole heart. Before the gods, I will sing your praise. Sort of interesting, God's lowercase g. Before the gods, I will sing your praise. What gods are they singing to? That's the first thing that comes to mind. So, if I think the analogy is there are no gods like our God, and this is obviously a lowercase g, but the fact that it's even in there can be problematic. Because it does sort of tell the tale that they are obviously in a place where there are other religions that are going on. I will bow down toward your holy temple and praise your name because your steadfast love and faithfulness, for you have glorified your name and your word above all things. So the first part is, again, thanksgiving, and a very important part of prayer. We give thanks, and then we ask for the petition, or we give or the intercession. When I called you, you answered me, and you increased my strength within me. The rulers of the earth shall praise you, O Lord, when they have heard the words of your mouth. They will sing of the ways of the Lord, that great is the glory of the Lord. The Lord is high, yet cares for the lowly, perceiving the haughty from afar. So the haughty, the people too big for their britches, who think they're better than the rest of us. And again, this whole idea that God doesn't call the qualified, God qualifies the called. So it isn't necessarily the gifts that we have that is the reason that God gives us, but God gives us the gifts that we need to be his people. Though I walk through the midst of trouble in you, keep me safe. Sounds reminiscent of Psalm 23. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Though I walk through the midst of trouble, you keep me safe. You stretch forth your hand against the fury of my enemies, and your right hand shall save me. Again, very reminiscent of Psalm 23. You make good your purpose for me. O Lord, your steadfast love endures forever. Do not abandon the works of your hands, which are us. We are the works of God's hands, so do not abandon us. Since you're in control of all this, again, the prayer is more like the Lord's Prayer. God's will is done with or without our prayer, but in this prayer we pray that we would be part of it. All right, let's move on to Luke. Maybe we'll be shorter today than I did on Tuesday. I just sort of rambled on Tuesday, and we got into some, and then I didn't have the music ready. So let's see, Luke 5, 1 through 11. This takes place, 5 chapters into Luke. Usually the call of the disciples in Matthew and Mark come a little earlier, and they are not really sure who Jesus is in Matthew and Mark yet. In Luke, there seems to be very little question who Jesus is, that Jesus is something more. Jesus is already seen as somebody who is sent by God and a representative of God. To the extent of how much they know about it, not yet. But in Luke, there's a little bit more progress than there is in Mark and Matthew in terms of this when the call happens for the disciples. The disciples' call happens earlier in those Gospels. This takes place by Lake Gennesaret. Lake Gennesaret. Well, Lake Gennesaret is basically the Sea of Galilee. So just another name for it at the time. Again, we have this idea that Jesus is calling sinners, that being a sinner does not disqualify you. As Peter dropped to his knees and saying, "Go away from me, Lord, for I'm a sinful man." And this is after they have this amazing catch of fish. And Jesus basically calls him anyway. So sin is not a disqualifier. As I said, a lot of times I think sin is the qualification. I was talking to a pastor years ago, and when I was in Hudson, and I said, we only accept sinners in our church, and he had never heard that before. And because he was in a non-denominational church, and they're all about being, righteous and forgiven, and the fact that I was saying we only accept sinners in our church struck him, but it struck him in a good and positive way, which is good, because again, that is how we witness. We witness to people who don't exactly have the same belief system that we do. And that's the trick, isn't it? To be able to talk to people who don't necessarily agree with us in terms of our beliefs, but to be able to have a constructive conversation and to allow Jesus and to allow God to work through us. And not only do we impart wisdom to some people, but they impart wisdom to us, because we may pick up something from them that we've never thought about before too. So something very curious about this, because this is a story of Simon, not catching anything and then putting down his nets, and when Jesus tells him to, and then he catches a big load of fish. In the Gospel of John, there's a similar situation that takes place with Peter, but it is a resurrection experience that Jesus is standing on the shore and tells him to put down the net. So it is a revelation of Jesus in resurrection in John. So when you think about that, has John taken this story from Matthew, Mark, and Luke and turned it into a resurrection story? Or has Matthew, Mark, and Luke turned John's resurrection story into a story of the call of the disciples? Interesting juxtaposition there to think about. But the fact that it is a resurrection story in John makes you stop and think about this. Again, we have God calling the disciples, and God really basically forgiving the disciples, or Jesus forgiving the disciples. And Luke loves miracles. That's another thing. He likes miracles, and he likes angels. So you have more angels in Luke than any other gospel. So he just likes the angels. So let's go ahead and read Luke 5, 1 through 11. Once, again, this is sort of just a random thing. Once, while Jesus was standing beside the lake of Gennesaret, the Sea of Galilee, and the crowd was pressing in on him to hear the word. So evidently there's already a crowd there. He's already preaching. He's already recognized as somebody or something from God. He saw two boats there at the shore of the lake, and the fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. So he got into one of the boats, one that belonged to Simon. And, of course, Simon is Peter. He hasn't had his name changed yet. And he asked him to put out a little way from the shore, and then sat down and taught the crowds from the boat, which was a fairly common practice, evidently, because you could get a lot of people on the beach, and you could preach from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out to the deep water and let your nets down for a catch." And Simon answered, "Master, we have worked all night long and have caught nothing. Yet, if you say so, I will let down the nets." So when he had done this, they caught so many fish that their nets were beginning to break. So they signaled their partners on the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled the boats so that they both began to sink. And when Simon and Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, not because the boats were sinking, but because there were so many fish and they hadn't caught any. And he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." It's when you come into the presence of God and you realize, I am not worthy to stand here. That's the thing. That's really the bottom line criteria, I think, as far as I'm concerned. I'm not worthy to stand before him. The only way I am worthy is through his mercy and his forgiveness. For he and all who were with him were amazed at the catch of fish that they had taken. And so also were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, the sons of thunder, who were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid, and from now on you will be catching people." So this is the call. And when they brought their boats to shore, they left everything and followed him. I always find it amazing that in these stories that they just drop what they're doing and follow him. I guess I look back at my call when I decided and accepted that call to go to seminary school and become a pastor. I did the same sort of thing. I just dropped what I was doing. Took off for Bexley, Ohio, and Capital University and Trinity Seminary with $50, a Chevelle, and a suitcase, and a full tank of gas, and sunglasses. No. So, when the call comes, someone once asked me, when Jesus calls you, does anyone ever turn him down? Well, I said, well, the rich man, we're not really sure what happened to the rich man, because Jesus told him to sell everything that he had and then to come and follow him, because he had obeyed all the laws and he had been living a good Jewish life. But Jesus said, you lack one thing: sell everything you have and then come and follow me. And then, with that, the young man took off. And we never hear what happened to him, if he did end up following him or not. I suppose the indication of the story is he did not. So, the song that I was thinking about that I didn't do it's Tuesday, that I had set up and said, oh no, that's the one for the gospel, is "You Have Come Down to the Lake Shore." It's I guess it's Hispanic. You have come down to the lake shore, seeking neither the wise or the wealthy, but only asking for me to follow. Sweet Lord, you have looked into my eyes, kindly smiling, you've called out my name. On the sand I have abandoned my small boat. Now with you I will seek other seas. You know full well what I have, Lord, neither treasure or weapons for conquest, just these my fish nets and will for working. Sweet Lord, you have looked into my eyes, You called out my name. On the sand I have abandoned my small boat. Now with you I will seek other seas. You have fished other waters. You the longing of souls that are yearning. Oh, loving friend, you have come to call me. Sweet Lord, you have looked into my eyes, kindly smiling. You called out my name. On the sand I have abandoned my small boat. Now with you I will seek other seas. That seemed appropriate. So, gracious Lord, be with us as we seek other seas, as you call us to places unknown. Help us to be receptive to your call, to hear your word, to not come up with the excuses, but to turn our lives over to what you have planned for us, and to not be afraid. As Jesus said to Simon, do not be afraid. From now on, you'll be catching people. Help us in our fishing journey of people to catch them. And through you, we pray. Amen. All right. That's it for today. Have a good day. Stay safe. It's melting out there, but this is that time of the year. Let's not have any more slips and falls and broken bones, okay? All right. Until next time, peace.